Well, ladies and gentlemen, for the first time since November, we are finally continuing with our review of the MCU with Guardians of the Galaxy. And before we get into the details, I actually want to kick this off with a personal story I have about my first experience with this movie. So back in the summer of 2014, I lived right by a train stop which took me to a transit center that had a movie theater by a beach. It only took me 10 minutes by train to get down there, so I decided to go down there and see what was playing in the theaters. And there wasn't really anything playing in the theater that caught my eye, other than this. Now, I had seen trailers for this all over the place because this is back when I still watched television, and I will admit, upon first glance, I thought it wasn't going to be a very good movie. 16-year-old me had a couple reasons for this. One, I didn't think as a pro wrestling fan that Dave Bautista would be able to successfully make the jump from pro wrestling superstar to A-list actor, which I'm happy I was wrong about. And, I mean, who the hell would want to see a movie about a talking raccoon? Like, come on. But I decided to buy a ticket and give the movie a chance, and I'm happy to say that I never laughed harder in a movie theater than I did seeing this movie for the first time. And that, my friends, is a good example of why, before judging something, maybe see it for yourself first. Because critics and trailers can say whatever they want, but you yourself will never know if you're actually going to like something unless you see it for yourself. So released in all theaters on August 1st, 2014, Guardians of the Galaxy is the 10th film in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Directed by James Gunn, who also co-wrote it with Nicole Perlman, the movie had an all-star cast which featured Chris Pratt from Parks and Rec, Zoe Saldana from Avatar, Dave Bautista, who is a professional wrestler, Vin Diesel, who is a professional bald guy, and Bradley Cooper, who's just an all-around awesome actor. The movie centers around 5 misfit outlaws who come together to form a powerful group and stop an evil Kree named Ronan, who works for the Mad Titan named Thanos. This movie is, in my opinion, definitely the funniest film in the entirety of the MCU, and some people could argue that was for better and for worse, because following this film, the MCU as a whole definitely shifted towards a more comedic tone. It went from just the Guardians are really funny to everybody has to be really funny. Badass, but also really funny. And you know, again, for better or for worse. The film cost about $232 million to make, and par for the course for Marvel, made a lot of money, around $773 million. And this might surprise you, but in addition to being the 3rd highest grossing film of 2014, it actually out-earned Captain America the Winter Soldier by about $60 million. The film spawned a sequel, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, which was released in 2017, and a 3rd film, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, will be released in 2023, at which point I hope to be done with the MCU or at least caught up, but at the pace I'm going, I fucking doubt it. But this opening segment's probably been long enough already, so I say we just dive right into it. Can the Guardians successfully guard the galaxy? Well, we're gonna find out right now as we take an MCU look back at Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1, released in 2014. So for being the funniest film in the MCU, this movie has arguably the saddest beginning in the MCU, as on Earth in 1988, young Peter Quill is preparing to say goodbye to his mother, who's about to pass away from cancer. She gives him some sort of present and asks him to take her hand, but he hesitates and then she dies. Distraught, Peter runs away outside until he's abducted by an alien spaceship. And now, holy time jump, Batman, it is 26 years later and we arrive on the abandoned planet of Morag. A now fully grown-up Peter Quill, who's transformed into a Ravager with the codename Star-Lord, dances his way for the planet until he finds some sort of mysterious orb. He's not the only one after it though, as he's ambushed by Kree forces led by a man named Korath. Korath works for a man named Ronan the Accuser, but before he can take Quill to him, Quill gets the orb back and flies his way on out of there. Back on his ship, he makes contact with Ravager boss Yondu, who was the man who kidnapped him off Earth and sent him to collect the orb. It looks like Quill is double-crossed him though, and he plans to take the orb to Xandar, the capital of the Nova Empire, to sell it for himself. Yondu is obviously furious about this and puts a bounty of 40,000 units out on Quill's head. Meanwhile, we meet Ronan the Accuser, who doesn't seem to be a very nice dude. Alright, so we get a lot of lore real quick here. Apparently Ronan and his people hate Xandar, and he's on a quest to destroy it. In order to do that, he's enlisted the help of the Mad Titan named Thanos, who he's going to give the orb to in exchange for Thanos destroying Xandar. To help him get the orb, Thanos has also loaned Ronan his 2 assassin daughters, Gamora and Nebula, and Ronan sends Gamora to Xandar to go collect it. Meanwhile, on Xandar, we meet talking raccoon named Rocket with his friend talking tree named Groot, who are apparently looking to collect on the bounty placed on Quill's head. Quill meanwhile tries to sell the orb to a buyer who immediately wants no part of it upon learning that Ronan is after it. Quill's then confronted by Gamora, who tries to steal the orb from him, and then Rocket and Groot get involved, and it turns into a big four-way battle. Quill is trying to get the orb back and avoid being captured, Gamora is trying to avoid all three of them, and Rocket and Groot are trying to capture Quill and also stop Gamora from getting in their way. This battle ends with Quill knocking out Gamora, Rocket knocking out Quill, and then all four of them being captured by the Nova Corps. The four of them are transferred to a prison, and Gamora reveals that she was actually planning on betraying Ronan and selling the orb for herself. Gamora seems to have a pretty bad rap in this prison though, as everybody knows that she's Thanos' daughter, while meanwhile Rocket and Groot put Quill under their protection. Later that night, a bunch of prisoners kidnap Gamora and they're about to murder her, but they're interrupted by Drax the Destroyer, who wants to kill Gamora himself as payback for Ronan murdering his family. Quill is able to talk him down though and convince him that as long as they keep Gamora alive, Ronan will come to them. So meanwhile, Ronan has since learned of Gamora's betrayal, and he confronts Thanos over this. Thanos does not seem to think much of Ronan though, and instructs him to collect the orb for him, or he'll smear his blood all across the galaxy, which doesn't seem like a very fun alternative. Meanwhile, our four, let's call them heroes, have agreed to split the money four ways upon selling the orb, and Rocket has formulated a plan to escape from the prison. They need to take control of the control tower, and they need to do a bunch of things and then collect a battery last. However, Groot jumps the gun, so they have to improvise. Groot tries to fight off a bunch of drones and Rocket can't do much to help him until Drax decides to get involved and throws him a gun. Quill and Gamora also do their parts, and then now 5 of them take control of the control tower. And Rocket's plan's now put into motion. Basically, he uses the tower to turn off the gravity inside the prison, except inside the tower, and then he uses the drones to lift the tower on out of there. They're able to escape on Quill's ship, the Milano, and even though Quill makes a detour to get his music player back, they all get out of there safely with the orb. So the crew make their way to Nowhere, which is an outlaw mining colony which was built on the severed head of a Celestial. So that's fun. They have to wait a little bit to meet with Gamora's client though, so Groot, Rocket, and Drax decide to get drunk in the meantime. Gamora reveals that Thanos is not actually her dad, and instead he actually blew up her planet and killed her parents right in front of her, so yeah, her turning on him makes a little bit more sense. Things go immediately wrong for Quill though, as not only does Gamora reject his advances, but then he has to break up a drunken bar fight between the other three. But then they finally get to meet Gamora's client, the Collector, Taneleer Tivian, who collects rare species from all across the galaxy. Tivian reveals that inside the orb is actually the Power Stone, which is one of the 6 Infinity Stones. Before we can talk numbers though, the Collector's assistant is apparently tired of being a slave, and she grabs the stone, which destroys his entire collection, as well as herself. Gamora and Peter then agree to take the stone to the Nova Corps, but things are about to get worse because in a fit of drunken rage, Drax has called Ronan. Oh, and also Yondu and the Ravengers are here too, so things just keep going better, don't they? So Gamora, Quill, and Rocket get in some spaceships and start fighting Nebula and the Kree, while meanwhile Drax is just getting his ass kicked by Ronan. Nebula appears to kill Gamora when she blows up her ship and takes the orb, while meanwhile Ronan apparently has killed Drax. Quill, however, gets out of his ship and puts his air mask on Gamora, and then he intentionally calls Yondu so that they can get abducted by him to save both their lives. Back on Nowhere, Drax is not actually dead, and he feels extreme remorse for putting everybody in danger. Rocket wants him and Groot to go all the way to the other side of the galaxy, but they decide to rescue Quill and Gamora instead. Meanwhile, Ronan has made quite the choice. He has decided that instead of giving the stone to Thanos, he's gonna say nah and turns on him and absorbs the stone himself into his own hammer. Nebula then also turns on Thanos, which again is quite a choice, and stays with Ronan instead. Back on a Ravenger ship, Quill and Gamora make a deal with Yondu, so that Yondu agrees to help them get the stone back as long as he can have it. And after Quill stops Rocket from blowing them up and giving one hell of a speech, they all formulate a plan on how to stop Ronan. Basically, the Guardians are going to breach Ronan's ship while the Ravengers cover them from the outside. Quill also contacts the Nova Corps in the hopes that they'll help him. And basically the endgame, no pun intended, goal here is that they need to stop Ronan from reaching the surface, because once he does that, there's nothing to stop him from destroying Xandar. They stage the assault, and hey, it looks like the Nova Corps got the message, as after the Guardians breach the ship, the Nova Corps form a barrier to keep the ship from hitting Xandar. They enter the ship and are confronted by Nebula, who Drax very quickly shoots down. Meanwhile, back on the surface, we finally get to see Yondu's mysterious whistle-powered pen thing in action as he takes down 20 Kree at once. 3 separate battles in startup. Rocket, who's in a Ravager ship, as well as the Ravagers, take down the Kree, Gamora battles Nebula, and then Drax, Quill, and Groot battle Korath and friends. Drax actually kills Korath, but then Ronan meanwhile blasts a hole for the Nova Corps' protective barricade. Gamora gets the better of Nebula, but when she tries to take her hand, Nebula cuts her own hand off and then steals a ship and flies away. 4 reunite and confront Ronan and shoot him with the big gun, which does absolutely fucking nothing. That's just great. Rocket has decided to do something though, as he crashes his ship right into Ronan's ship, which starts to propel the ship downward towards Xandar. And as the ship prepares to hit the ground, Groot sacrifices himself by forming a protective barrier around all of them and proclaiming, "We are Groot," which I can only imagine translates into "We are family." Well, they all hit the ground and they're all fine. Surely Ronan's dead too, right? Nah, just kidding, he's fine. Ronan's about to destroy Xandar, but Quill distracts him by challenging him to a dance-off. This distraction gives Rocket enough time to repair the weapon, which he uses to destroy Ronan's hammer, which sets the stone free. Quill grabs the stone for himself, but before the stone can destroy him, all the Guardians lock hands and use their combined strength to control the stone and use it to evaporate Ronan. And now that all that is settled, Yondu wants to make good on the agreement and demands the stone, which Quill gives to him. However, just kidding, not really, as he actually gave him a fake. And as they're flying away, Yondu reveals that apparently their original job and the reason they kidnapped Quill was to bring him to his father, which they decided not to do. Speaking of which, the Nova Corps informs him that while his mother was human, his dad apparently is some sort of ancient unknown being, which is probably why he was able to hold the stone as long as he did. Quill gives the real Infinity Stone to the Nova Corps, and as a reward, their criminal records are expunged, and also, they get a brand new ship. And after all these years, Quill finally opens that last present from his mom, which contains a mixtape of all her favorite songs. Yondu, meanwhile, finds out that he got a troll doll instead of a stone, and the new Guardians of the Galaxy set off as Groot begins to regrow. And our film ends with a simple but hilarious end credit scene as the Collector sits in the rubble of his destroyed archive with his 2 remaining exhibits, Cosmo the Space Dog and Howard the Duck. Well, now it's time to make the difficult choice on where this ranks in the MCU, and we're going to do that right now by pulling up our MCU big board. So I was thinking this is going to be a hard decision, but to be honest, I think this fits pretty well over here at 4th. So, here are the new MCU rankings. The Avengers, number 1, Iron Man, number 2, Captain America the Winter Soldier, number 3, Guardians of the Galaxy, number 4, Captain America the First Avenger, number 5, Thor, number 6, Iron Man 3, number 7, Iron Man 2, number 8, The Incredible Hulk, number 9, and Thor the Dark World, number 10. So on the basis, it may seem like that this is just a funny film and it doesn't do much to move along the plot of the MCU, but trust me, it does a lot. Not only do we get to see another Infinity Stone fully in action, but we get our first real taste of Thanos. You could argue not really, because he wasn't really in action, but I mean, we get what he's about. We get all, like how intimidating he is, how huge he's supposed to be, even though Ronan ended up, betraying him. It wouldn't have worked out probably even if he had kept the stone. And the way he just Ronan was supposed to be the main villain, and in that scene he just makes him just seem lesser. He automatically from the beginning had that presence about him where even if you didn't know much about Marvel lore, you look at the guy, you're like, that guy's gonna be a fucking problem later. And dear God, saying that he was a problem was an understatement, but we've got a while until we get to that. Another thing about this film though is while it does have consequences towards the future of the MCU, you don't necessarily need to see any of the other films before to understand this, it's kind of a whole new world in a sense. So it's not a bad, one-off movie for people to see, even if they haven't seen any of the previous 9 films in the franchise. And again, if you're looking to watch one of the funniest movies that you've ever seen, one of the funniest movies I've ever seen, probably the funniest movie I ever saw in theaters, and again, unquestionably in my opinion, the funniest MCU movie, I would highly recommend Guardians of the Galaxy. And hopefully it does not take me that long to get to the next MCU movie, which is the second Avengers film, which is highly underrated in my opinion, Avengers Age of Ultron. But that, ladies and gentlemen, is going to do it for my MCU look back at Guardians of the Galaxy. We're 10 films into the MCU, we have 2 more films left in Phase 2, and then we get to Phase 3, and holy shit, there's a lot in Phase 3. And then we've got all these films in Phase 4 coming out, but hopefully we can catch up at some point. But we'll see. We will see. But that's going to do it for me today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Thank you guys for watching. If you liked it, be sure to like it. If you didn't like it, don't. If you want to follow any of my social media links, they're on the description down below. Thank you to all 80 of my patrons for supporting me and my channels. A whole lot being said, though, my name is Noah Taff. This has been my MCU look back at Guardians of the Galaxy, released in 2014. And I'll see you guys next time. Bye.